Greetings, this is my week 5 reflection on assessment, and so what I'm doing is I'm reflecting on some of the different things from the reading that I thought could directly be applied to my classroom. And so that's the main thing I'm going to be dealing with today. And so the first article I read was Supporting Change in Classroom Assessment. And after reading this, in my AP Physics class, students have to do free response questions. And so part of my struggle is getting them to do a free response question, to have them learn from it, and to have it graded quickly and easily, so I don't have to go through many free response questions and grade them when I want them rather to get a lot of exposure to free response questions. So after reading this article, here's some of the things that I kind of took away that I could do. And so I want to develop, and I haven't done this yet, but I want to develop a rubric for my students for solving free response questions. And so what I have already is a lot of questions that have a rubric for the content, so how many points they would get on the question. What I also want to make a rubric for is for the process of taking the free response and using the grading rubric. And so this process rubric, which I want to develop, could be used by students to self-evaluate, or it could be used by students to peer evaluate. And the content rubric they're going to use to grade the physics problem, how they did, but the process rubric is going to grade the students on using the content rubric and kind of looking at the big ideas. And so this process rubric is going to be answering the question, did the student give themselves or their peers the correct score? Did they give appropriate feedback? And did they or did they not kind of get the big ideas for what the question was asking, or for the type of question? Were they able to do the type of skill the question was asking? And I want to make these gradable through the acceptable and non-acceptable grading. And so I will get this free response, and I'll see all of the stuff they've done. I'll see the filled out rubrics, and either it's going to be acceptable or non-acceptable. I'm not going to spend time going through every single detail. And so I need to come up with a way of making this rubric so that there's some standards for acceptable and not acceptable, and I can go through it, and my students have done what they need to do. I can go ahead and give them a full score for that. When I was reading through the 7 practices, going along the lines of doing this, I thought of some other ideas for making this a little bit better. So one of the practices 2 was showing criteria models in advance. So for the first free response question I do in the year, what I can do is make several exemplars or fake free responses from strong to weak to help students internalize the differences in how to use the process rubric that I'm going to make. After reading practices 5 and 6, providing feedback often and early, and encouraging self-assessment and goal setting, as part of the process rubric, I can have a question on there. What did you do well, and what could you do to improve next time, or on a similar problem? And so I'll give the kids a chance to self-assess, to set some goals, and to and have to evaluate how they did, what they did well, and what they could do better next time. Lastly, from practice number 7, allowing new evidence to replace old evidence, I will give students who receive not acceptable a chance to receive credit if they can revise their work to reach the standards of the process rubric. And in order to get this credit, they have to provide some evidence that they've taken corrective action. So rather than just giving me a new thing to grade, they're going to have to justify what they've changed and explain in words why the new answer is right, or why the new rubric is filled out correctly. After reading the article about assessment in science, kind of looking to further this a little bit more, I want to make those process rubrics in a way so that they're looking at the key components that AP is looking for. So whether it might be Were you able to correctly write a procedure as per these guidelines? Or were you, I'll jump down to the certain one here, review AP objectives and find a way to incorporate them in the next year teaching. Look at what AP is expecting, the big ideas. Students need to be able to know explicitly that they are developing or not developing habits of the mind and learning the big ideas that are going to help them for science. And so to incorporate that into the rubric so that students can evaluate, are they doing these things? The last thing after reading this article I thought I could do is with my lab reports or labs, I know other teachers that have done this, but I haven't done it yet, making a cooperative assessment. And so selecting or developing tasks or labs that students could do collaboratively and coming up with ways to assess that fairly. Last but not least, after reading the evidence basis for science article, I was thinking that for my labs, I could follow up the lab, and this is actually from the discussion forum. A really good idea that I read or I heard about was to make a small performance assessment or a small lab quiz after the lab to make the students accountable for not only learning the lab, doing well in the lab, but learning the content that they need to minimize cheating, so the students really know that they're going to have to do something after this lab. And their grades are going to be based on whether they can do that or answer those questions. And if they don't understand the lab, they're going to have some difficulties. And so I just put this little quote here: performance-based assessments are considered to be more appropriate for uses with inquiry-based scientific learning, which is a big focus of AP Physics 1. Then our paper pencil test. These assessments require the students to approach problems as a scientist while handling equipment and materials. Performance assessments require the students construct rather than select responses. Performance items allow teachers to observe student behavior on tasks. Scoring can reveal patterns in student learning and thinking. Whether used as pre-assessment, formative, or summative assessment, I can help measure their scientific inquiry skills and content knowledge. This is huge for AP Physics 1. Can the students perform a laboratory investigation and all the practices involved in there? And so I'm really looking forward to sitting down and spending some time, even watching this podcast again, and following through with these things that I've set out to do. Well, this has been my reflection this week, and I hope that it's been helpful.